something in the selectmen's agenda where they appointed a member from the housing committee to our committee?
That's me.
No, it was a man.
We all set?
You mean the Housing Authority?
The Housing
Oh, the Housing
Authority.
Authority.
Yeah.
I did not see that, but I'm sure that our chairperson could address
No,
that.
he doesn't.
Under public comments, are there anybody that would like to address the board? Okay. Approval of the minutes, January 24th, 2018. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of January 24th, 2018.
And I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion.
Two minor corrections.
All set?
Yeah,
Well,
All in-
what are the corrections?
Oh,
on, you want me to tell 'em?
yeah.
On page 1, halfway through, when it says, it is undeveloped land that has some existing trails, not trials. And then on page 5, middle of the second motion on the page, I omitted Cindy's last name when she seconded that motion.
You said page 5?
Page 5, second motion, so it's the first one under H3.
Okay.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Old business. Dave Spitz, update on the Brooks Academy CPC funding. David's not here. David had an event in his life, personal life. He lost his dad. No?
Son.
Son.
Ooh.
I stand corrected, I'm sorry. Based on that information, David wasn't, the discussion David and I had, he wasn't going to be here for this particular discussion or the last discussion. He was going to let the CPC do what the board wanted to do. Do we want to go ahead and continue, or do we want to refrain and see if he may change his mind, or? Jim?
My feeling is that we would be better off tabling the matter until David was able to attend the meeting.
Kathy?
I disagree. I spoke to David the other day, and he felt quite comfortable not being here. I had a conversation with him on the phone. I asked for some clarification. What I asked him was that I thought that our intention when we spoke to him in the fall was that we would get perhaps get a breakdown of items that had been either proposed and finished, and what those costs were associated, and what had been proposed and hadn't been addressed yet, either by Public Works or the inmate program or whatever, and therefore what was left remaining and what was proposed estimates for those. And I actually did go back. We've been missing the actual applications from 2007, 2008. I actually found a treasure trove, and God, is there an echo in here or something? I actually found at least one of the actual articles, the application, which discussed what needed to be done. But when I asked Dave about it, he said that they really needed to have the study done in order to really assess what they were going to do moving forward. That to come up with some stuff to use up the money from those prior articles really would just be sort of guessing. So he felt that it was really important to continue the funding of the study, but he didn't feel it was as important to to keep the funds remaining in those other two articles.
So, Kathy, would the proposal then be that we call back all the money that has been allocated with the exception of the $30,000 for the study?
That would be my recommendation.
Okay. That was sort of where I was heading. Anyhow, is there any urgency to move on that before David is able to attend a meeting? I mean, do they need to start spending the money, like, between now and our meeting the next month?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Again, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, see, and again, while I'm not questioning your discussion with David, I would rather have David here to give that in
Sure.
person before we actually voted on it, as long as there's no urgency in proceeding.
Dan?
I'm kind of leaning towards continuing with the study, but then withholding, taking back the remaining funds and basically start all over again, see what the study discloses, and then they can decide what path they want to take. And we can have a better sense of where they're going.
Mary?
I'm feeling the same, but I do appreciate Jim's comment that, I just think out of courtesy, I wouldn't do it tonight. If there's no urgency to do it tonight, then I just wouldn't tonight, but.
Yeah, let me just clarify my comment. I would advocate for letting David come and talk to us one more time.
Kathy?
Mr. Chair, I believe he said he was going to send some representatives from his committee here this evening.
Yes. Could
I'm
you
Barry.
identify yourself and?
I'm Barry Knowles on the committee, and Peg Rose is here also. We have had discussions at our meetings, Brooks Academy, and David did give a presentation here, a prior meeting, and I think he would really want to have you, if possible, approve the $30,000 for the study as soon as possible without delay, because then we could get started on assessing the issues. I mean, there's a lot of issues, a lot of things that need to be dealt with, but instead of delaying it for another month, if that could be approved, I think it would be excellent.
Okay. Anybody else?
Peggy Rose, also from the Brooks Academy Museum Commission. I did chat with David just briefly yesterday. I don't know if you have this information, but he passed this along to me, that he's been in touch with Bob, the town engineer, and Chris Clark about putting together a sample RFP for the study. As Barry said, that is the most urgent need, because with that in hand, maybe some of the things, the debate that CPC committees in all towns seem to have, restoration versus renovation, it really will be restoration if we go too long without fixing some of these things.
Okay, thank you. Kathy?
Well, just a point of reference is that, as it stands right now, the study has already been funded. Therefore, if they were to put together an RFP in the next month, there wouldn't be any problem with that, because we haven't taken any action. Unless we took action tonight and rescinded the $30,000 for the study, the money's still there. At least that's my understanding.
Jim?
And Kathy was reading my mind, because from a legal point of view, and we're going to make a lawyer out of Kathy, from a legal point of view, you have the money available and you can start work on the study as soon as you leave the meeting, because we have not taken any action to take back any of the money that we have allocated to you as yet. So, I don't think our tabling any action on this would cause any delay to Brooks Academy in proceeding with getting that RFP on the street and, getting a bid and getting that process started. And hopefully that process would generate some, information and backup information for future proposals that you would come to us in the next funding cycle.
Well, we're smacking them, go ahead.
Just a
Go
quick
ahead.
question. If the money was rescinded, this wouldn't go to fund anything that you're voting on for this town meeting, correct?
No.
No.
Okay, okay.
Is it still going to be there? Yes.
Okay, and I think that's all we need to know. Thank you for your indulgence. As I said last fall to you folks, we truthfully should have been on top of this a little more, but, you know, you expect your chairman to take the lead, and the former chairman did not, so, thank you.
All righty, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, what's the board's pleasure? It's twofold.
My pleasure would be to table action on this until David was available to discuss the matter with us. And again, with our tabling it, the funds are presently available and they are perfectly within their rights to proceed.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we table this matter until Mr. Spitz is available to discuss this matter with us in person.
I'll second it.
And there's a second. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, the warrant, we're gonna have a discussion now on the warrant articles for the 2018 town meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Jim?
could I ask a procedural question?
Sure.
At our last meeting, we voted to, on the various project applications as to what we would approve and recommend to go to town meeting. The warrants are really just the technical description in order to implement what we voted at the last meeting.
Right.
You and our eminent vice chairman are, in my mind, more than capable of turning our votes from the last meeting into the proper format to get to town meeting. Kathy has gone through it and distributed it to us, and I think it's certainly fair that we discuss it, and if anybody has any comments on what Kathy distributed, that's fine. But I question whether or not we need a vote. And I think by voting on each individual article again, it sort of puts some of us in a strange position where if we were in the minority and, then asked to vote on the warrant article, are we voting on the format or are we voting on the substance? And does that mean we're re-voting the substances that we voted at the last meeting? Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Kathy?
I think.
That was well done. That was well
Good.
done.
Thank you.
Two things. One, I think we need to review them because I'm the one that typed up most of it, and I want to make sure that got the numbers right and whatever.
Yeah,
And
that's
two, I think that in the past, I think it's been just sort of a formality that we vote on the warrant articles. I'm not sure that,
And I will offer this, because it's done in the past, doesn't mean it has to be in the present.
Right. And again, I completely agree with Kathy's discussion or Kathy's comment about reviewing them in case anybody on the committee sees an issue where maybe a number is wrong or, something isn't exactly the way we voted it at the last meeting. But again, I feel very uncomfortable voting on the warrant articles themselves.
Go ahead, Dan?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards Jim's recommendation because unless we're not going to change any of the amounts or the purposes on what we voted on last month. So we're simply looking at the verbiage and making sure that it's accurate. So we don't have to vote per se on each article, but we can comment where we think maybe something needs to be added or clarified.
Mary?
I guess my question is procedurally, these go back to Board of Selectmen, and then presumably Board of Selectmen are going to have town council review them before the
That's
warrant?
correct.
Because I
Yeah.
mean,
That's
that's my bigger concern, is that town council puts them, that puts them in legal form, in proper legal form, so that they then tell the town they're in proper legal form for inclusion on the warrant, and they do what we want it to do in accordance with our votes. I tend to think that's where the editing really happens, as opposed to ours, or at least the confirmation happens that it says what it needs to say.
So why don't I just make an executive decision and say that we don't need to vote on it, but we need to go through and review and change, if possible, some of the verbiage in the language. Kathy?
Just a note that pretty much in the past, what we have submitted is what actually goes into the
Okay.
the warrant book, with very little changes.
All right.
And just as another point, in that all of these are modeled after the prior 2 years' articles. I really tried to make sure that the language was consistent all the way through, because the language in terms of like what they call the reserve fund or balances has been all over the place with all the different articles, and I tried to make sure that it was consistent all the way through. Don't know if it's right, but that's what I did.
And
Go ahead, Mary, finish.
my only point is, I don't think the onus should be on you or a member of the committee to ensure that. That's why we have town council, in my own opinion.
No,
So
that's.
I think it's a belt and suspenders for all the good work that you've done, and please don't take it
Town
as
council's
questioning it.
definitely gonna go through all this.
Yeah, so that's where I'm coming from. It's a big onus to draft them and make sure that they're right, so that they stand up.
Well,
And I just have a suggestion, Mr. Chairman. While I fully support your executive decision, I think what we basically just need to do, since these had been sent to us prior, is, and at least we can assume that people have, had the chance to review them, just ask if anybody has any comments on any of them.
okay, well, the new units that have been sent out by administration, there's some issues with them, and after we get through this little exercise, we'll
What do
go
you mean
through.
units?
Like the Affordable Housing Trust article,
Oh, okay, the different articles.
the different
Well,
articles.
why don't we review the articles that we know?
So
that we
let's
did.
conclude,
Okay.
Jim's, do we all agree
Yes.
that we don't need a motion on it? It's just,
Discussion.
right, okay. Kathy, I'm gonna let you start because
Oh, okay.
you put in the lion's share in this one.
Okay, we don't have the numbers for the reserve, right? Typically, we put this in with a blank and then somebody fills in those amounts, the exact amounts.
The finance director is
Oh,
here.
she just, well, I wouldn't know what they are, so,
I want to take that particular,
you have the amounts there?
no, these are for a couple of articles. I'm going to take that particular piece of information to her,
Okay,
and she is the finance director.
right, this refers to the 10%
Right.
allocation.
How that works out.
That's just it, that's the exact amounts for those 3 accounts, that's all it
Right.
refers to, okay. But does
Agreed.
anybody have any problems with the way that this is written? And again, the article letters or numbers is gonna change, this is just for the sake of,
Placeholder.
yeah. Do you see any spelling mistakes, or if you don't like the way it looks, or doesn't make any sense, please say something. And the second one regarding the bank debt service, again, I don't have that exact amount, they'll fill that in.
Right, we do have that amount, we
We
do
do, but-
that, but that's right, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Right,
I-
so, all right, so any questions on the first page?
Excuse me, Kathy, just before we proceed. I just wanted to double check your wording
Okay,
with the exact wording of the statute. And the first one for open space is fine. One for historic resources is fine. Okay, on the next one down, sum of money for the acquisition, creation, preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong one.
Okay.
I apologize. Okay, and why I got, you did not put in one here for recreation?
It doesn't have its own, it comes
Oh,
under
okay.
undesignated.
Oh, okay, fine,
And that's right, yep.
okay. Okay, fine, thank you.
Aye, aye, Captain. All right, moving on.
I indeed, we're good.
Albro
Yep.
House. Just review that and just make sure, I mean, that it says, you know, the right category and the right amount and,
The one thing I'd like to bring your attention to, in everything that Kathy has drawn up, in the article, it says, any funds left unspent from this article are to be returned to the Community Preservation Act, whatever the fund bank that came out of. And please keep that in your minds for the future as we go through these articles. Continue, please.
okay. And then the second one, the digitization, same thing. Any questions? No? Okay. The library restoration. And I did take the liberty of, on some of them, of creating the verbiage that describes them. So for example, for the library, I didn't say, you know, just, I put additional, because it's in addition to last year's funding. Because I think when the public reads this at town meeting, they need to know, you know, what they're voting on.
Agreed.
And for a couple of the articles, I just tried to make it so it was clear, in case they weren't familiar with something. Like, for example, the construction of the municipal public record storage facility in the Harwich Community Center basement, which is a little wordy, but people need to know that. They need to know exactly what they're voting on, because they don't get a lot of other information. Let's see. Moving on, if there's no other questions. I don't think there's anything. Okay, when you get down to the Cape Housing Institute funding, they indicated it was specifically for year 2, because that's what it was for. And we have to enter into a grant agreement with them because they're not a town entity. And so that's listed here in the warrant article. And this is written up the same as it has been in the past. And I did identify what the Cape Housing Institute was as a little explanation. Now, town council or whoever's writing this stuff up might say, heck, I don't want to put all this stuff in here, but I think it was important to get people to understand what it was for, without going into a lot of detail.
Mary?
Just one question on that. Is the Cape Community Housing Partnership the actual entity that's, or is it Housing Assistance Corporation that actually does the community? That's the only piece that I wasn't clear
Okay,
on.
so it's not a component of the Cape Community Housing Partnership? 'Cause I took this right off the application. No?
It could be. I thought, maybe I was mistaken. I thought the Housing Assistance Corporation was the actual applicant. Am I mistaken
I
on
didn't
that?
see that on the application. But you can double check, that's fine if that's a issue. I mean, I'll be glad to change it. We'll have to change all this
I
stuff
could be
tonight.
wrong.
Yeah.
Same thing with Habitat for Humanity. We have to enter in a grant agreement with them. I went back to most of the applications to get the exact name of the applicant, like Habitat for Humanity of Cape Cod, Inc. Brooks Park, Pleasant Lake Crossing Lights,
How
and
many-
then,
Excuse me for
Yeah.
an instant, sorry. Of what you just read?
Yes.
There were 2 grants,
yes,
2 grant applications only?
yes, so far, for
Okay.
those, for the ones we have,
Right. Okay, thank you.
the Cape Institute and Habitat. And then the last one with this packet, which is the purchase of the conservation restriction, I typed up something similar to what we used on the Marini property, and then I had Mike Locke from Harwich Conservation Trust fill in the particulars of the, the book and map plan, et cetera. Other than that, I think that one, the land ones in particular are ones that town council tweaks, which is totally understandable.
Just one point of
Yep.
reference, I think, on the
Mayor,
Article JJ, the Cape Housing Institute, I think it is, technically should read, Lower Cape Cod Community Development Corporation doing business as Community Development Partnership.
All right, so say that again, where do you want me to change this?
So where we talk about the Cape Community Housing Partnership, I actually think the application was made, it looks like the application was made by Lower Cape Cod Community Development Corporation, doing business as Community Development Partnership.
Okay. I'm gonna have to look at the application then.
You want the cover,
Check
the
mine right
letter?
there.
Pass it the letter.
At the last paragraph on that page, it gives that DBA stuff, but if you flip it, it says something a little different. Yeah, I just threw it out.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, where are you reading this?
The first page,
Yeah,
when it says DBA,
mm-hmm,
and then when you flip it, down here, Cape Housing Institute is a component of the Cape Community Housing Partnership. So they're actually using 4
Okay.
different names.
okay, so,
Okay.
Make it easy.
I don't know which one is the actual title for the grant. I mean, that's what we're really,
Personally, I defer to the opening paragraph of the letter where it says an application from the Lower Cape Cod Community Development Corporation.
what does DBA stand for?
Doing business as.
Doing business as, okay. Okay, I'll be glad to do
mean,
whatever
that's
you want me to do.
certainly-
So if you want me to say, enter into a grant agreement with, and then put in the Lower Cape, Lower Cape Cod Community Development Corp,
Corporation.
and I'll just put DBA.
Yes.
Community Development Partnership. Do you still want me to keep in parentheses, the Cape Housing Institute as a component of the Cape Community Housing
What was the
Partnership?
I don't have it in front of me. What was the title of the application?
Cape Housing Institute.
Then I want to see that in the article.
Okay. All right, so I'll just add that. I'll just add the Lower Cape thing, all right? No problem.
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, I have a question on what's here is Article NN, the purchase of conservation restriction. My recollection is a little bit foggy, and unfortunately, I don't have the application with me tonight. But I thought the actual fee interest in the property was going to be acquired and then would become subject to a conservation restriction. Am I correct, or am I remembering incorrectly?
I don't know the legalese. All I
Yeah.
was doing was going off of the Marini property one, which was a similar situation where we were purchasing a conservation restriction. So I'm sure that town council is gonna
I have the,
tweak this.
Do you have the application, Mary? Because my recollection, and even in the Marini property, I think the fee was being acquired. But that's not what's before us
When
tonight.
you say that, what do you mean?
Well, the fee interest is the entire ownership of the property.
Okay, the entire ownership is gonna be held by the Harwich Conservation Trust.
Right, so Harwich Conservation Trust is going to acquire the fee interest.
Yes,
It's going to be then made subject to a conservation restriction, which is going to be enforced by the Town Conservation Commission.
correct.
And the support of it, the $200,000 from community preservation funds, is only to contribute to the acquisition of the fee interest, and not
Not a
to,
purchase,
not the purchase of the conservation restriction.
okay.
But the concept is that, let's see what the application says, because I remember I asked Michael all these questions
Yeah.
because the application was very confusing with regard to that.
I kept hearing the terminology purchase, but I don't know enough about it, to tell you the truth. And actually, I had Michael look at this.
here, Jim, I think it's this one, open space 11.
Did I give you 11 or 12?
Pass it on.
You gave me 12.
Oh, good. You did say
No
NA,
wonder I
didn't
was
you?
confused. Thank you.
I still have them in there out of order, but just by the night. Oh, I did give you 12. Okay. Definitely not what we wanted. Cornelius.
Now, see, in this particular article,
That's different, though.
Oh, Cornelius is
That's a purchase.
Eldridge. Yeah,
but this has the money going back.
Which one is that?
This is Cornelius.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's written up, looks different. Okay, what about it?
The verbiage for the CPC. Money being returned, monies being returned.
Who typed
Yeah,
this up?
the language after the Self-Help Act.
Who did this one? No, I'm just asking.
That's the town.
The town did this one?
Yeah.
the three
Oh.
missing ones.
No, this isn't one of the three missing ones, the Cornelius Pond.
I mean, excuse me.
The
They
town-
did, they did a fourth one, is what you're saying?
They did a, well,
Oh. That's okay.
Yep.
I don't care.
no, that's,
Less,
Different
less for me to retype.
right.
Yeah,
But you don't have this, so,
Okay.
to be fair to you, Kathy,
Yeah.
and this is where I had a discussion with Michael when he was in front of us. The way this is written is exactly the way that you have reflected it. However, if you go further into it, it says the land ownership will be transferred to the Harwich Conservation Trust. So therefore, basically, the Harwich Conservation Trust is buying the fee interest in the property. It will then become subject to a permanent conservation restriction that will be enforced by the town conservation agent. So I think the vote that we have here needs to reflect that. And also the fact that the $200,000 that is coming from community preservation funds is only to contribute to that purchase, because the purchase is, I think the purchase price is like $850,000 with a donation of 50% and contributions by Harwich Conservation Trust of $425,000. So that this $200,000 will be part of the $425,000.
Right,
So it's only support, the $200,000 is just supporting it.
okay. This is what the town wrote up.
Okay, now again, just the first sentence of this has the same
I know,
initial error.
because they were
That I
going
put
off
here.
the Marini
Because
property
they
one.
were, okay, whatever. So, I would say we need to get that straightened out so that it, the warrant actually reflects the way the deal is being structured. Mary?
Mary?
I also had a question through you to Jim. After the self-help language and the conservation fund, I wasn't sure about the language on the reimbursements that's in the one that the town drafted.
The one in your hand.
Oh, okay.
We don't have that.
She didn't get to them. You want me to make copies of that?
That
Yeah,
you-
well-
Yes.
Yeah. She gave me just the 3.
What you're saying, can I address Mary?
Go ahead.
What you're saying is that they didn't put that line in about any return of the money.
No, that line is in.
That
That
line
is
is
there.
in,
Yeah,
But
that
it
is
was,
there.
but
'Cause
it was,
that
there was
a
language
request.
relating to, isn't there language in there, or I could have misread it. I
Yeah.
thought there was language in there that related to refunding the Harwich Conservation Trust.
No, funds shall be returned upon receipt to the Community Preservation Act fund from which said fund was appropriated. It's
It
the
would be-
language that's in here.
But right after the self-help fund,
Yeah, that's right after the self-help fund.
all right, then I maybe misread it.
Yeah, which was my understanding and which, we actually questioned Michael on when he was here.
I thought there was credit, I thought it said something about credit to the Conservation Trust for their contributions
No.
as
No.
well, okay.
No, it's discussing if Conservation Trust of the town gets any grants in order to reimburse the funding for the purchase of the property, then, the funding, what we contribute would be returned to the Community Preservation Act fund.
All right, so
So what do you want to do about this?
how do you want to correct this?
Well, I think my real concern is at the introduction. And the town version and Kathy's version are exactly the same. Talks about the purchase of a, perpetual conservation restriction. Well, yes, there will be a perpetual conservation restriction on it, but the way the deal is going down is that the Harwich Conservation Trust is purchasing a fee interest in the property, which will then be made subject to a permanent conservation restriction to be enforced by the town.
Jim, that's your expertise.
Yes.
That's your legalese.
Right.
I'm assuming that the town,
Would you like to change the wording up top from purchase to somehow reflect the word support?
Well, then
is
the
it
other,
more, is it more than one word change?
oh, yes.
Yes,
So
The-
you're
the
putting in a
whole-
whole paragraph then?
Well, no, it's really just the beginning of, this is one big, long paragraph, and it's really just the beginning 3 or 4 lines. And then the other issue is that the purchase is not 100% through conservation, through the community preservation funds, but the community preservation funds is going to be supporting that purchase, to the extent of $200,000.
just gonna throw it out there, you tell me
Sure.
if it's accurate.
Yeah.
I would say that the community preservation, the $200,000 is granted to the trust as contribution for their purchase of the fee simple interest in the property, and in consideration of the CPC's grant of the 200,000, the trust is going to then perpetually restrict by a conservation restriction the property purchased.
Yeah,
Something-
that's definitely the concept, Mary. I would
And
word
that's
it a
what
little
what
bit
needs to be.
differently.
That's what needs to be.
But that's the concept that is
You just
my
want it to-
understanding.
You want it to reflect accurately
want
as
it to
opposed to, we're not specifically paying them for a conservation
We're
restriction.
not buying,
We're helping them,
Right.
we're helping them make the purchase, and then in consideration for the purchase,
All
for
right,
that
so
assistance they're
And the
providing us.
purchase will
before we
be,
go any further, let's cut to the chase. How do we draft that to make that wording?
well, I think what we have to do is we have to change like the first 3 or 4 lines completely. Yes.
Kathy?
Can I just make a suggestion that we maybe finish going over a couple of these, and then
And we'll
maybe
come back.
Mary and Jim can put their heads together for 5 minutes and come up with a little bit of a rewrite at the beginning? Because town council's gonna take this and change it anyway to
Right.
their liking, but we can submit it however we want.
I trust Jim's judgment on it, if he's got some language, or if you want to,
I mean, I'd be happy to
Do you want
do
to
it.
hold this, and then we can
Yeah,
have you
I mean,
draft?
let me just ask you the question, do we need to submit this tonight?
Tomorrow,
Okay.
by
They have to
noontime.
be in by noon tomorrow.
Okay, well, I can take, it's gonna take more than 5 minutes. And
Okay.
what I would rather do is, if we go through all these, I can spend 10 or 15 minutes after
Okay.
the meeting to redraft it to the concept that we've both discussed, assuming that the committee is in agreement with that concept, and I'll just put that concept in, legal wording.
Can you send that email to Kathy
No, I meant handwrite it right here before I leave tonight.
before we leave?
You're right.
Okay,
Okay.
that's fine.
I mean,
go for it.
I could do it tomorrow by email and send it to Kathy
No,
if that's
she-
easier.
She's doing the work, so,
Yeah.
No, that's fine, we'll stay, okay,
I mean, I'm perfectly happy to stay, because
okay.
it will only take, but it will take more than 5 minutes. It
Okay.
will take, my guess, about
So,
15 minutes to
In
do that.
review, okay, this initial packet, okay, the articles, the way they're written, except for the Cape Housing Institute with that addition of the Lower Cape Cod Community, blah, blah, blah,
The legal language,
DBA,
yep.
are fine, with the exception of the Cornelius Pond project, which we're gonna rewrite to reflect more appropriate wording. So is that our understanding?
Yeah,
we in
I
agreement?
Yes.
I would just sort of clarify, the correction will be to reflect our understanding as to how the deal is going to be consummated.
Correct.
Okay.
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 All right. Next, what do you
Well,
want
the
to go to
next
June?
the next one are the 3 that the town administrator was asked to write up. I don't know anything about them, so I guess we just need to review them.
All right, so the next article is the Judith Eldridge property acquisition. Um, You all have that in front of you.
Doesn't have the amount in here.
It does not?
Nope, the
No,
last line.
it's the last line that's left open for us. to-
Yeah, estimated cost, and they just didn't put a blank.
Right, but it needs to be specified here because some of it's from undesignated and some is
Some of
from
it's from
open
constant.
space. So that needs to be designated exactly what's coming from open space reserves, and I've given you that information, correct?
Yes, you did.
And I agree with Kathy, because basically, just having an estimated cost isn't tying the town into anything.
Correct.
And what we have to do is we have to write it into the warrant article so that it's very clear exactly how many dollars are coming out of community preservation funds.
So this is how we said it at the last meeting.
Okay, yeah, that's,
Well, it was
what I
like
have in that paper.
159,000
all right, here, it's
something.
369,000 total.
Right,
From open space funds, $209,695.30. I don't know if you want to leave the cents in there, round up, round down.
well,
And then from open space funds,
That was open
that
space.
was open
I'm sorry.
space.
It was open space.
the undesignated fund,
Yep,
$159,304.70.
right, for a grand total of,
369,000. You want my calculator?
No? Nope, that's right. So that needs to be written in.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
just a question on this one. Is this actually two separate articles, or is it one? Is it to fund the eminent domain? Is our funding of it one article, and then the town's authorization on the eminent domain a separate, or is it all one? Because when I read the opening paragraph, it reads to me like it's. 'cause
Here, we're providing the funds for the purchase of this particular property. It so happens by eminent domain.
Right.
But our purview is just to provide the funds for the purchasing. At least that's my understanding.
Oh, yeah, I think I see Mary's point here. Then we
Thanks, Jim.
should be specific in that, because what this
Okay.
is saying is it is authorizing the selectmen to acquire.
Okay.
Right,
So, and what we're doing is we are
funding the
authorizing.
acquisition.
Yeah, we're providing the funds for the acquisition, you know, by purchase, gift, or eminent domain, however they want to do it.
So how do you want to change that?
Well, let's,
I think you have to bifurcate it. It can be in the same article, I think, in the same vote, but I think it has to be bifurcated somewhat to say that you're funding the acquisition and to approve the grant of Community Preservation Act funds and these amounts from these undesignated funds to accomplish the acquisition or to support the acquisition.
well, I guess I have a technical problem, which I'm not sure any of us in this room can answer. And that is there going to have to be a separate vote for
That's-
the actual acquisition?
Well, that's my question. I'm afraid that if we have two votes, one succeeds, one fails, then you're in the same issue that we were concerned
Interesting.
about with the trust.
So what you're saying is we're only approving the funding
We're
here. There may
approving the-
be another whole warrant article for,
But this reads like it's the acquisition.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
me, it reads like it's the acquisition,
Yes.
Well,
and I don't
Because
know if it's.
this is the way it's been done in the past. Not to say that that is the way
Understood.
that it's been done, but this is the way it's been done
We're
before.
perhaps it should be together in one, but just with an A and a B on the way it's written, but somewhere you gotta fit in
Well,
the
Well,
funding.
One quick question to the two attorneys on the board. Are we writing the legalese here? Or is the town supposed to write the legalese?
So I would expect that town council would be drafting it. My concern is just, this seems like it's funding, this doesn't seem like this is the funding article, this seems like it's an acquisition
it's the
article.
acquisition article, and I guess my question.
So there's a separate,
Does it have to be
is-
two, or can we
is
make it one?
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that has to be asked of town council.
I guess
Whether or
my-
not whether or not the two can be combined into one, or, you know, one vote at town meeting, or whether there will be a need for two votes, in which case it would have to be structured so the vote on the funding would come before the vote on the actual acquisition. And then if the acquisition does not pass, then the funding, you know, would revert back to community preservation.
So I guess I'd request that we somewhere in here added made this a second, split this into two paragraphs, and added the funding language in here so that it's clear that it's the acquisition and the funding. Because then if you approve one, then you're not approving one without the other, you're approving both at the same time.
why do I get
But
a
it's-
feway we're going beyond our scope?
Yeah, that's what I
We're
think.
going way
I was
beyond.
gonna
Yeah.
say,
Believe me,
I think we are
too.
too. You see, what I would recommend, Mary, is that we draft this with regard to just what we're doing, which is we're funding.
Right.
And that then if town council wants to edit it to also put in and the acquisition, you know, itself, then let town council do that. Or town council may realize what we're doing and then do a separate warrant article for the actual, you know, approving the acquisition of the property.
So can I make a recommendation then, if we change the opening the opening sentence, where it says vote to authorize, make that vote to appropriate the sum of $209,695.30 from the open space, the correct language for the open space account, and then the sum of the $159,304.70 from the undesignated fund, and then say
To,
to fund the acquisition by the Board of Selectmen, by purchase, gift, and/or eminent domain for conservation and open space purposes. I think if we maybe put that clause in the first sentence, it might accomplish what we needed to accomplish,
I think
and
you're
then
right,
let them
Mary.
go from there.
okay, so what you wanted to say, to see if the town will vote to
Appropriate
appropriate,
the sum,
and then the two sums, okay,
sum of X and sum of Y,
right?
to total the $369,000 from
Yeah.
Community Preservation Act funds.
And then what?
To,
Yeah, basically,
um,
you know,
to fund,
or, you know, let's see, vote
to fund the acquisition by the Board of Selectmen by purchase, gift, and/or eminent domain for conservation open space purposes, a parcel of land.
Yeah, that sounds good, Mary.
Okay, so you wanted to say, to see if the town will vote to appropriate, using
The sum-
the undesignated
the sum of
funds, and sum of
X,
X and the sum
Sum
of
of
whatever,
Y, yep.
totaling 369,000, to fund the acquisition by the Board of Selectmen to acquire by purchase, blah, 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 blah.
Correct.
Yep.
I also want the article to reflect any funds that are left unspent from the article are to be returned
Right.
to the appropriate
Okay,
fund balance.
right. You just want that added in,
Yep.
right, okay. All right, so to see if the town will vote to appropriate the amounts, okay, to fund the acquisition by the Board of Selectmen, blah, 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 blah. And then,
by, right, if you, acquisition by the Board of Selectmen, by purchase, blank,
Or-
eminent domain, whatever that language is.
Through purchase.
You've already got that language there.
Yeah,
I think you just need to, you've already said acquisition.
it
so
says
you need
by
to-
purchase, gift, and/or eminent
yeah,
domain.
okay,
You're
that's
just
fine.
gonna have to
Take
delete
out-
acquire, because
Yeah, I
acquire
got
goes
it.
before.
I got it, I got it.
You're good.
And so at the end, do any unspent funds, the last sentence in the entire.
I'll put it
thing?
wherever it's appropriate from other articles.
And then minor technical editing, we can then delete the estimated cost at the end.
Yes. And we can correct Eldridge in the opening sentence. There's two Ds. Too many Ds.
What are you saying?
In the title, there's too many Ds in Eldridge.
Yeah, I got that. We always put the estimated cost, because we don't want them to go above that amount.
But we already have the.
I know,
the
but on
cost
all
in
of
there.
them, we have an
we?
estimated cost, yeah.
Oh,
On
okay.
all of them, there's estimated costs, and then there's a motion.
Oh, okay,
So I'll type it up like we have.
okay.
Do we need to add a motion to the town ones? that
Yeah.
we- Because they
Well,
don't
yeah,
have.
I mean,
Right.
they just didn't do that. I mean, I'm gonna put it in, they can take it out, I don't,
Exactly.
you know.
Nope, understood.
This is just how the thing appears, and actually, in prior years, printed actually in the warrant article is whether we voted on it and supported it, and then whether Board of Selectmen supported it, whether the Finance Committee supported it.
And they'll probably be done again,
Yeah,
but they'll be done on their side.
right, okay. So, we're good with,
We're good with us?
Jude
We're good with
Eldridge?
Eldridge? Okay, we're moving on.
I mean, I hope I can get it right, but,
Yep. Hinckley's is next.
okay.
I think Hank,
Go ahead, Kathy.
I don't get the raise and appropriate,
it's the same problem. It's the same problem that you had in the last one,
okay.
right? Because it was really talking about the acquisition.
So
This
they
is
took a
talking about-
boilerplate.
This is
Yeah.
talking about really to raise whatever you want, and I think we want a targeted article that says to appropriate X amount from community preservation funds to support the acquisition.
Well, first of all, I would want to put what it was first, like we've done in some of the other ones.
In this,
Second
it
line has
talks specifically about the remediation of Hinckley's Pond. But the total amount includes the recreational aspect of it, and it's not here. Dan?
Am I missing something here, but why is there no reference to the aluminum treatment?
Don't know the answer to that question.
I
Mary?
mean, according to this,
Why does it say borrow a sum of money?
So I think it's the same thing that they had done in the last article. It looks like it's a generic,
Okay,
you know, for funding a project period, whereas we want a community preservation
Specific.
appropriation. And the town may need to, you never know, they may need to, if the bids come back at 800 and they need to acquire more, then maybe there's something else than
all right,
just
so
ours.
would we not do what we've done before, which is to say, to see if the town will vote to appropriate from Community Preservation Act funds, 650,000 undesignated fund balance, for the, and then whatever.
I think if you do an opening sentence like we did on the Eldridge property, I think that'll get what you need, at least in the.
But we're not acquiring or.
No, but it's, but what I'm saying is if you say to see if the fund will appropriate,
Well, we're asking the voters to appropriate, in other words,
from Community Preservation Act funds.
right,
To fund, the implementation.
Yep.
Of a portion of Phase 2 of the Town of Harwich Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. And consisting of design, construction, and remediation of Hinckley's.
and we should say using alum after, or in parentheses,
You know what, I would say probably including the alum,
I was gonna
including an alum
inclusive.
treatment and,
but it really should just be all alum. If they're doing something else, then that's not what we voted on.
Right.
We voted for an alum treatment.
well, we voted for an alum treatment and we voted for,
Well,
Recreation.
the recreation, that's
Mr.
different, I haven't
Chairman.
got to that yet.
Right.
right, but I think it's all part of the same vote, correct?
You know, I agree, but
Right.
right now, we're talking about the
Dan, are
description.
you comfortable with the word alum?
Let me just give me a second here, I thought
It is an alum treatment.
it's aluminum treatments to control internal phosphorus loading in lakes on Cape Cod.
Okay, so you want us to use that?
That's technically what it is.
Okay, so the first description is about the remediation. So it's the consisting of the design, construction, and remediation using aluminum treatment
Aluminum treatments.
of Hinkley Pond, da-da-da-da.
Jim?
Okay, my only concern about that is what happens then if between now and the time they're ready to implement this, which may be, another year or two, there is a better way of remediating Hinckley's Pond that is recommended by the engineers. If that occurs, then by putting in that wording, the town would not be able to spend these funds for any other type of treatment of Hinckley's Pond, and therefore would have to come back to us and go through the entire procedure again in order to be able to spend those funds. Personally, while I understand Dan's point, that is what they had proposed to us, and there had been some discussion about the effectiveness of that type of treatment, I don't think in this type of vote, we want to tie the town's hands down to specifically that type of treatment, if a better treatment can be found.
What is do you have the application in front of you by any chance? If the application
That's what I
reads
grabbed the first
specifically alum treatment, then that's the end of the
Yeah, I agree.
that's,
There's 15.
In that instance, I'd defer to the gentleman who worked for the MWRA for years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just concerned, and again, maybe being too much of an attorney, that alum may be a major part of the treatment, but there may be other things that are discovered within the next year or so that may be even more effective. And I think really the intent of the application was to take care of the problem and not to, and that the.
To remediate the phosphorus.
Right, right, and that the discussion of the treatment methodology was to give us an idea of the possibility and also to estimate what the cost was, because that certainly is, the thinking of how it would be remediated at the present time. So while I understand David's point with regard to the technical wording of the application, in this case, I would rather, and again, I may be arguing against myself since I voted against this, last week, or last meeting, but I think we go to in my mind, we go to the intent of the application as opposed to the technical detail of the application.
So would you recommend that we just leave it the way it is? Design, construction, and remediation?
Yes.
Okay.
But I would also, put in an associated recreational
Well, yeah, we have to
facility.
add that in.
This reads like a scientific textbook.
But can I ask you something?
Sure.
It says here, including any land acquisition costs. What does that refer to?
Well, that I would take out, and I
Yeah.
think that's probably boilerplate that somebody left in, because there was
Okay.
no proposal of any land acquisition costs. There was specific discussion of potential land acquisition for additional parking, and the applicant said no.
I didn't know if it referred to any easements that we might need, or
There may be a
or
requirement.
takings for a way, so
The-
that's kind of why I didn't,
Well, there may be a requirement for temporary easements with regard to the treatment process. They may have to cross over somebody's
so
lawn
that was why
in
it
order
didn't
to get to
concern
the
me.
pond, but that would only be a temporary, temporary easement, which they could also do by a license agreement,
Okay,
as opposed to a permanent acquisition of rights and land.
I'm hung up on the alum.
You're hung up on the
I'm
alum?
hung up on the alum. What precludes them, if they don't get what they need, or if they find a different method to do what they're gonna do, why shouldn't they come back to us?
Well, I think they're, and not
This
to
is- if
speak for
this-
the town, but this is probably something that's not going to be done for about 2 years. In that 2-year process, if something brand new is discovered, to go back through us and go through town meeting again and all, it would be an additional year in the process.
Mr. Chair,
I've got a problem with that.
Well,
Mary?
if I can follow up, I think if the concern is that they'll use the money for something else, you are restricting them by saying that the money's gonna be used for the, remediation of the pond and the implementation of the wastewater management plan. That's giving you a very solid restriction anyway.
Does it say specifically in the plan that you just referenced that alum treatment is the method that they're gonna remediate the pond with?
I understand that, but they're still, ultimately, you're remediating the pond. And again, I'm gonna say, my gut legal instinct is to trust the gentleman that worked for the MWRA.
For the second time.
Who
For the
dealt
second
who
time.
dealt with remediation
understand.
a heck of a lot more than any of the rest of us in the room.
Remember
So-
that thing about a pluralistic society? Go ahead, Dan.
couple of things. We go through this exercise of reviewing the applications and getting the applicants to specify just exactly how they're going to manage this project and spend the money. And now we're suggesting, well, maybe not. Secondly, there is still the application. We approved an application that includes an alum treatment. Now, if the warrant doesn't want to specify that, they're still bound by that approved application, in my view.
Kathy?
Well, I think it would only be fair to the taxpayers to put in there that it's an alum treatment, so they know.
Well, I'm gonna put this forward for a motion. Do I have a motion to change the language of the application to include alum treatment?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I think we've already had the
I think we
discussion.
do too.
Have to cover it.
I think we even know how the
Still
votes are
have to-
gonna
I
come
think we
out.
do too.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Moving on.
All right, wait a second, so let me just.
So the lawyers
me-
got
The
defeated.
lawyers
All right,
got
the lawyers
defeated,
got
Jim.
defeated. Okay.
Jeez.
Now, I just want to
Wow.
go over this real quick then. So see if the town will vote to appropriate from Community Preservation Act funds, undesignated balance, $575,000, okay, for the implementation of blah, 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 consisting of design, construction, and remediation using aluminum treatment of Hinckley's
Or
Pond.
inclusive of aluminum treatment.
Inclusive means that you could use something else in addition to it, doesn't it?
In addition to, yes. Yeah, something else in addition to the aluminum treatment.
I thought we were just sticking with aluminum treatment, though. That's what they asked for, that's what they said. They said it was gonna be alum treatment. They touted the success of 20 years of alum treatments.
And now the non-attorneys want to box the.
Actually, if you use the term inclusive, it would satisfy our legal experts here because there's some wiggle room there.
I'm not sure that there's wiggle room right here.
I mean, we just voted to use the term.
Yes, well, I'm talking about the term whether shall use or inclusive of.
Inclusive seems to give them some more wiggle room, though.
That's right.
Why are we gonna bother to change it then? I mean, I thought we just had this conversation that we didn't want to allow wiggle room.
Okay,
No, maybe I had that wrong.
That's exactly the point.
okay.
Yeah, that's why we voted the way we voted. Jim?
David, just to weigh in on this issue, even though I'm not part of this discussion, I think by making it inclusive of, it could, to use the ridiculous extreme, it could allow the town to use something completely different and then throw in a spoonful of the aloe treatment, and they say, okay, we've met our requirement.
They're not that unethical.
But I'm talking from a legal point of view, they would be able to do that. So,
All right, then,
Okay, so, to see if the town will vote to appropriate from Community Preservation Act funds, undesignated fund balance, a sum of $575,000, to implement blah, 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 design, construction, and remediation, parentheses, using aluminum treatment, okay, of Hinckley's Pond. Then, we need to add in, and, you know, I'll draft up something about the recreation component. It won't say recreation, it'll say, using Community Preservation Act funds, undesignated fund balance, the sum of $75,000 for the
Public
purchasing,
access.
the building of a, design and building of a walkway, bike kiosk.
Yeah, but in the application, it's a recreational component.
Yeah, no,
That's
I'm
what
not
it
just
says.
saying, but it's,
Those words have to be in there.
yes.
Okay.
And didn't they also talk about increasing public access?
There is no way to increase public access. It's the creation of the creation of the walkway, the viewing platform. That is the public access. That's
It-
increasing the public access. That's nothing else that's increasing public access.
Mary, it depends on how you frame that. If you're talking about vehicle access,
No,
But-
and I'm not. I don't
Okay.
think,
okay.
I don't view public access as being limited to cars, because I think you've got public access, walking access to beaches is increasing public access if you've got an easement, so.
Okay.
So do you have a problem with, you want any different language?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Trust you to draft something up.
But you
Okay.
can't add in another 75,000.
No, the whole total thing was 650,000.
Well, right.
So it's 575,000 and 75,000.
Just as long as it's acknowledged,
Yeah, it's gotta
the
be,
two separate components.
Right.
Yeah.
We're good.
okay.
Next up. The Housing Trust.
I don't have that one. Wait a second.
The last page.
Here,
No, wait. I got it right here, sorry. It doesn't say anything in here, excuse me, Mr. Chairperson.
go ahead.
It doesn't say anything here about the part-time housing coordinator.
Yeah.
Kathy, and pass this down to Jim, and then would you pass it back? Just take a brief look at that.
I mean, I think we do need to have the thing in there that says that this is subject to the housing trust except in statute and related bylaw. Plus, they'll probably add in if something like this has to have like a 2/3 vote. They usually do that. Like, I think the purchase of land, I think maybe might have to have a 2/3 vote.
I think it does
Yes,
too.
it does.
Yeah, so they'll be putting that in.
Yeah, and to address the, I think we should be specific about the fact that, $30,000 if this is going to go for a part-time housing coordinator. So I think somehow we need to write that in. And it could go after to create and preserve affordable housing in the town of Harwich and to hire a part-time housing coordinator in an amount not to exceed $30,000.
I thought it was 49,000.
For the housing coordinator, no, I thought it was.
No, it's like 31.5 or something.
Okay, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
What you folks looked at is the draft of the article, just so you're aware. Now, we have a different draft.
What do you mean draft of the article?
That was the draft of the article.
Whose draft? No, I mean,
The
who's,
town of Harwich.
that's all they gave you?
So now we have this in front of us. And again, this, I have a real problem with this because nowhere does this reflect the person that is supposed to be involved in this as far as the salary and wages. And the other thing is, depending on what happens at town meeting, the CPC needs to have the money come back to the CPC. And there's no recognition of that whatsoever. So,
But I do think making it subject to the vote of the trust. The trust doesn't happen, it comes back.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
no, Mary's exactly right. I mean, if the trust doesn't occur, this whole,
Goes away.
this is.
right, but
this
that
is-
language should be in,
It has to be
not
in.
that particular language?
It doesn't need to be.
'Cause this says it already.
This says it already, David. By saying subject to, that means that unless the town votes for the housing trust, this, if it votes for this and not the housing trust, then this money can't be spent and will automatically revert back to us.
Right, it's never appropriated.
So I think just the subject to language is sufficient.
I stand corrected. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure
Yeah,
that
yeah,
we're made whole,
Right.
it's all.
And I think the subject to language does that.
Yeah.
Okay, the exact amounts are $461,500 for the actual trust. And there was another 38.5 for salary, administration, legal fees. So how do we want to do
Well, I
that?
don't think we need to separate out.
Okay.
I mean, I think we can leave the total dollar amount, but I do think we need to specify in here that it is also to hire a part-time housing coordinator.
Okay,
And I don't think we have to put a dollar amount on that.
I agree.
Oh, I lost it.
Okay, so aside from the addition of part-time housing coordinator language, are there any other changes to this?
No, I think
Not
Jim
for
had
me.
good language.
Yeah, and I think you could just add that after the town of Harwich.
Yeah.
So, preservation of affordable housing in the town of Harwich and the hiring of
Yeah.
a part-time housing coordinator.
Yeah. Okay, so other than that, this one is fine.
I'm trusting my two colleagues
Because the only,
who know more about the subject than I do.
I don't think it would hurt for us to put in the same clause that we put into all the other ones.
Every one of the articles has it.
so what I guess my comment would be, if for some reason the trust doesn't get established, which isn't necessarily the same thing as the vote, you could add a sentence that says if the trust isn't established, that the money will be returned, the funds will be returned to the community preservation, which would cover what Jim's concern was when we were discussing it prior to the vote, that if, or Joe's comment, if there was some technical, for some technical reason, the Attorney General's office thought that the trust failed or didn't get established. That's the only other thing, but I do think you're covered. I really don't think you ultimately need it, because if the trust doesn't get voted on, the appropriation never happens.
Correct.
But
Kathy?
But if we don't put the clause in, and for example, let's say the trust, the bylaw gets passed, the statute, then the bylaw, and then the trust gets approved, and then let's just say the thing goes nowhere. I mean, that's not gonna happen, but let's just say, okay? Then if we have the clause in there, then we would be able to rescind the monies back to the community preservation fund if we determined that it wasn't going anywhere.
I think you can do it anyway, personally.
Yeah, I was going to say
Speaking.
the same thing. I mean, we went through the whole discussion in the fall about, bringing back money that hadn't been spent, and we just had the same discussion with regard to the Brooks Academy. So I think we can do that anyhow. I think, and
This is different, this is also different than
Yeah.
painting a building or
Right.
doing an alum treatment. This
Right.
is an ongoing situation
Right.
where it still could take you a year to get them up
Oh,
and running and start doing
absolutely.
projects.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So I don't know that you're in the same situation where you're gonna have a set of funds, it's just gonna be stagnant. I think you will find that the money, if the 500 doesn't get spent right away, it's gonna
I
get
have
spent
no
at some
doubt
point.
that that is all gonna happen, but why not just put in the sentence like we put it in all the other?
And I hate to use this term, and I've never used this term at any
Okay.
one of these meetings, but I think there is a political sensitivity, which adding that in may generate some comments that maybe is better not, sort of be made. I think, I am convinced that if it doesn't go anyplace, even though it's voted on and established, we would be able to bring the money back in, just like we've done with other applicants, that we've done this year. So even though we've had it in other warrants, but those were warrants where we specifically discussed that issue when the applicant was in front of us. We discussed the issue with Michael on the land purchase. We discussed the issue with Charlene on Alborough House. So in those cases, it was very clear that the applicant was agreeing to that ahead of time. In this case, I don't think we had that discussion, with the proponents of this issue.
Dan?
What if we use language like, non-acceptance of the trust would nullify this appropriation?
They're saying that's a given anyway.
I know, but we're,
Well, non-acceptance of the trust by whom?
by
Town.
the stick,
Is this a two-thirds vote to put
said
the trust in
appropriation is
place?
subject to approval of the
That I
Housing
don't
Trust
know.
Acceptance
think so.
Statute. So
I
it'd be
don't
the-
think so, no. Excuse me?
I mean, I agree that I don't think we need the language, but
I
I was
don't
just
think we
throwing
need
out
the
something
language,
that-
and I
that
think
might
I think we're
bridge.
better off just not putting it in.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
I'm uncomfortable, but
What's it gonna hurt, though?
I'll
I mean,
go
if
with
we,
my,
if we put it in the same as we put it in every other warrant article that we've written
Current
up.
concern that I have is that if the trust doesn't get established, then we didn't give anything.
Right.
There's nothing to return,
Correct.
Okay, all right.
so.
That's exactly what the language in here,
Yeah,
by making it subject to,
yeah,
that's exactly what that means.
yeah.
okay, we have an agreement?
The actual clause, though, says any funds unspent.
Right, yeah. Well, it's,
Just
They
saying.
can't do anything without
spend
a
any
vote,
money if they
period.
don't have a trust.
Yeah,
I'm thinking beyond.
No, and Kathy, I understand your point, but the intent of the trust said it's going to be ongoing
I
till the end
understand
of
that.
time. So they may not spend much of it in the first year, but their intent will be to continue to work and spend it in future years.
I understand that.
And just like we've done with other applicants, if it goes out too long, then we bring it back without being spent.
I give.
Another angle is that if the trust gets established, and let's say they're not successful, and there's unspent monies, then after 2-3 years, we can call them in.
Right.
And say, hey, we want our money back.
Right, but
So-
the reason we have this verbiage, okay, is because, can I just explain
go
this?
ahead, yeah.
The reason we have the verbiage is because in earlier years, we didn't have it in, and in order to get the money rescinded, there was a time when we had to go back to town meeting in order to do that, okay? That since has changed, and right now is that if it's not in there, is at the discretion of the finance director and the CPC
The
chair,
chair.
and I don't know if there's anybody else involved. But that was the reason why the verbiage was initially
But
more clarified.
correct me if I'm wrong, but in one discussion we had earlier, back in the fall about the policies, isn't that part of our application? Isn't that stated in the application?
The
I don't-
3-year thing?
That if it's not used in 3 years, we have the right to take it back?
We
Yeah.
we modified that a few years back.
Well,
I don't,
there's something in
don't-
the application.
Right.
the application right here.
Is it 2 or 3 years?
It's 3 years. It has a start date and an end date.
Mm-hmm.
Has July 1, something, something, ends, whatever.
3 years from the release of funds, in this case, July 18, funds may be rescinded automatically. Waivers may be sought.
Right. So I think, it's a 3-year waiting period, but I think that takes care of the issue that you raised, Kathy.
Okay. I'm fine with leaving that out. We've made a meal out of a snack here, people.
And
Yeah,
I
but
think
there's-
I would
There's
prefer to leave it out.
consistency in that meal.
Okay. Okay, so this Affordable Housing Trust, the only thing we're gonna add is the hiring of a part-time housing coordinator.
Correct.
Correct, all right. I got the Hinckley's Pond one, the due to Eldridge, I got the language there.
And I'm going to do the language for the
Right, Cornelius.
Cornelius, yeah.
Okay, and then we are changing the Cape Housing Institute thing to include the other thing. Other than that, we're
Okay.
in pretty good shape, I guess.
Before we go through any further, take a peek at that. That's administration's way of combining under one article the following.
Oh, is that what they're going for?
That's what the request is.
We had a discussion, can I just,
Go.
we've had a discussion about this before at this committee, and it was felt that people on town meeting floor deserve the right to address each of these individually versus grouping them together.
Pass that down, and I'll pass it down on the side. Because we're gonna make a decision on it tonight.
I mean, this is kind of random, this grouping. I don't understand it at all.
I just received
Maybe I need to go
this.
home.
I just received this tonight, that's why you don't have copies.
I think it's this part that he's,
Yeah,
Right,
okay.
right.
Yeah, no, I agree with Kathy. I think we're better off having these voted on individually. These smaller ones, I think, you know, what the town administration is trying to do is just sort of speed up the town meeting process.
Right,
But I don't think these smaller ones take that much amount of extra time
right.
that, you know, that they should be grouped together. And I think it is quite possible that some members of town, some of the voting members at town meeting may agree with some of these, but not all of these.
I'm gonna need a copy of this junk that you're passing around, I think.
maybe.
Because you're discussing them at the open meeting.
You can take that and make copies for all of us.
You don't wanna just email me?
No, I'm gonna
Okay.
have you make copies. I'm gonna ask a question of the finance director. And this isn't to put you on the spot, but is there any more information that you may have addressing just the top? Since Chris,
I believe that it was an opportunity, they thought, to consolidate anything under $50,000, which they do with small capital items as well. So I think they were just following suit with that. That's all.
okay. What's the board's pleasure? Can,
My
Jim?
thought would be to keep it all separate.
Okay. Are we in agreement? Dan?
Well, I'm just thinking, I mean, these folks have had years and years and years of experience in municipal operations. I don't know if we should just defer to their judgment and
Interesting.
David?
Jim?
Yeah, one of my concerns besides the citizens having the opportunity to vote on each one individually is if there is one in that list that for some reason a group of individuals in town are opposed to, for whatever reason, they could rally enough support to defeat all of them
And take it down.
and take it down, as opposed to just the one that they're opposed to.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a
but,
great point.
There again, I'm saying that, these folks have years and years of municipal experience. I'm sure they've given that thought, so.
I disagree with that thought.
Disagree too.
Actually, you just changed my mind. Do I need to call for a vote on this?
Oh, no.
Oh, no, I don't think you do.
All right.
You have the consensus of the board.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm going with the consensus of the board.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily supporting that. I'm
Right,
just
right.
commenting.
I mean, that got my attention. So, I agree.
That's true. That's very true, because if you look at what's happened in past years,
oh,
the
yeah.
ones that, believe it or not, I mean, like the crossing lights, there are a lot of people who have problems with the crossing lights. And they'll speak up and the thing, no, and I'm just saying, in past years, it's like, gone down in flames.
Right.
So, where are we at? We're at, that's yours, I'm sorry. I was looking for another copy,
At
but,
the end of the meeting.
Okay. And
All
I just-
right.
Just a quick question. The
sure.
articles, can they be submitted by
Electronic,
electronically
Yes.
to Ann,
no, Sandy,
to Sandy?
yeah,
All right.
that's the request.
Okay.
Um,
I'm tired already, thinking
Okay.
about changing them.
all right.
Thursday, it's Thursday. Only one day left.
Now, three of these articles, two of these articles are gonna demand a grant agreement.
Yeah.
All right. What about the balance of the articles?
What do you mean? Oh, the additional ones that they gave us?
Yeah,
Well, Judah Eldridge is not gonna require a grant. Hinckley's isn't gonna require a grant, I don't think, and neither is the Housing Trust. That's a separate thing. So I think the only grant agreements would be the ones between the Cape Housing Institute and Habitat for Humanity.
Kathy?
The-
Will
Jim.
the one with the one that I'm editing,
Yeah,
will that require a grant agreement with Harwich Conservation Trust?
no, not typically. No.
Okay.
But the one regarding the trust,
Yeah,
is the trust gonna be a separate entity from the town?
Which
Well-
trust?
the Housing Trust
Housing
he's talking
Trust.
about.
The Affordable Housing Trust he's talking about.
Is that gonna be a separate entity on its own?
That's-
If that were the case, then
My understanding, and again, I don't think they've gone far enough to think it through, is that it will be under the umbrella of the town. It will not be like the housing authority
Right.
or, have a separate,
okay, so it
it will be part of
won't
the
be
town.
separately
No,
incorporated
it will be the
as
town, it will be,
the town,
It will be a
offshoot
trust,
of
but
the-
it'll be a political subdivision of the
of the
municipal
town of
corporation.
Harwich, yes.
Okay, all right.
so,
Thank you for putting that in the
welcome.
correct language, Mary.
Dan, memorandum of understanding for the rest of them, the rest of the articles. What do you think of that?
Just explain that a little bit more.
Well, Yarmouth sets up with all their, I was looking at all their articles that I had access to, and they set up they call it the Town of Yarmouth Community Preservation Act Memorandum of Understanding. And what it is they're granted X amount of dollars, there's a period of time, and then they give reports.
My suggestion would be that we just hold off on that until we get into a discussion of the policies and protocols and that we're gonna be talking about regarding the whole application process.
Right, and I agree with Dan on that.
Okay, will we be able to implement that before the Maytown agreement, Maytown meeting?
No,
No. No. Once we get into the, because I went around to half a dozen towns, and there's some interesting stuff going on out there in terms of how they administer their CP funds. So we're gonna have some lengthy discussions, I think, down the road.
Yay.
All right.
yes, and I think, excuse me, Dave,
Go ahead, Jim.
I think we're also going to have some lengthy discussions on the community preservation plan. which I view the policies as being a component of.
Yes, we still have to do a plan.
We still have to do a plan according to the statute,
Yep.
and we have started that process, and I think we still haven't come to grips with what that plan really is.
Yep.
So I think that type of discussion, that you have suggested, David, is proper in the discussion of the policies and the plan.
Okay, for the moment.
I think we might want to have some discussion about how we're going to approach this. It's not just going to be cleaning up and reviewing the application. I think it's going to go beyond that. And I
Way
think we might
beyond
want to talk about a strategy about how we
Right.
structure it,
Correct.
what kind of components we want to include in it.
Right. And I think, to me, the biggest issue, and I know you're more into the policy and I'm more into the plan end, is that the history of this organization has been, we've been reactive. And I think we need to rethink whether we want to continue to be reactive, whether we want to be proactive,
Yep.
or whether we want to develop some hybrid.
Okay, what I will say is this. As the chair, right now as it stands, I'm looking at the amounts of money that are gonna get approved by town meeting. And understanding what has happened to the past, I don't want to happen again. So I may use a mechanism where I inform the grantees, all of them, that they're gonna provide documentation to this board over a period of time.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't have any disagreement there.
Oh,
no, we
no.
call
that
Of
Okay,
course not.
that's fine.
That was gonna be my comment,
Yeah.
is
That's fine.
there's
Yeah.
nothing prohibiting you from asking for
Right.
periodic updates.
We
Right.
have, during the course of the year, we'll call in.
We have annual
grantees.
reports, but you
Annual.
would like to make it
A little more.
biannually or quarterly?
Quarterly, semi-annually,
You know,
I don't
and,
see any restriction on you
No.
making the decision to do that
and,
throughout the year.
excuse me, David? In the past, my understanding was that we had tried to do that and actually brought the applicants in, but we weren't always successful in having the applicants come in to talk to us.
all right, so that's the next question I have, and I'll put it to the two attorneys of the board. And this is the spirited person in me, I guess.
Don't be mean.
Can we take punitive measures if an applicant doesn't provide the follow-up information that the board requests or the chair requests?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm too used to being in business. Go ahead.
I'm gonna say,
There-
I don't think I think punitive comes down to you recall the money.
That's exactly right.
Right.
But
And-
that's your purview anyway. I don't think there's anything else to me, punitive means fines and penalties and charges. You're dealing with 90% of these are your town departments, right? They're town department heads. They're asked to respond. They're going to respond. There are other ways that administration can handle that if they don't.
Yeah.
So
Go to Chris
No,
Clark.
no, I don't want to involve administration in this. These are applicants, it doesn't matter if they're from the town or
Of course it
external.
does. Of course it does. They are employees.
I don't
They are
see it that way.
employees. They are employees of the town, and your grant to,
All right, we'll
your
agree to
grant is a
disagree.
grant to the town regardless of
Jim.
how you look at it.
David, I think that is perhaps maybe one of the first things we should talk about when we're discussing policies, because I think if we're going to do something like that, it has to be through a formally adopted policy of this committee that is made down to all the applicants. And as of yet, we don't have a policy on that.
Right, but I still have the ability to do it.
It depends on what you're talking about doing.
Kathy?
I just wanted to mention that when I was reviewing the applications, we have at least 4 applications with no project manager listed at all. So we will have to get a project manager listed to move forward, I think. We have to have somebody responsible.
It's gonna have a lot
I
of
would argue
discussion
town
around that.
administration, if it's not, if it's a town application, I would say it's town
Well,
administration.
then it should be on the application,
Right?
is all I'm saying.
And I don't disagree with you, but I'm saying if there isn't somebody named,
Yeah.
that's where it lands.
Yeah, it goes right to Chris.
Send it back
Right?
for resubmission.
That's what we said we might do, but we're not gonna do that now. All I'm saying is that in terms of paperwork
Understood.
on our end, we should make sure we get
Yes.
project managers listed, so that there
We
is
should get
no
all the
doubt as to who to ask for an annual report, et cetera, that's all.
Just think
But
of
I would
what
also
you're,
say it's
just think of
appropriate
what
to
you're
ask the
saying.
town.
You're
town
asking a
report.
department manager that has put this forward because of administration, that may not have any expertise whatsoever to accept the responsibility. I got you. It's just, I find it fascinating.
I disagree with that.
Excuse me, could I take about a 2-minute break?
You can.
Thank you.
Oh, we're not leaving?
Recess.
Oh, we're recessed? I was gonna, are we gonna talk about the policies and procedures?
Go make copies of this real quick.
Yes, you can. Yep.
Kathy's looking for a.
Way out. Make a statement.
I did. I just, were we gonna discuss, I'm looking at the agenda here, the, discussion on the CPC policies, protocols, applications, and process?
I thought we were in the process of
Okay.
discussion.
I just wanted to say that when I went through the first box, which was 2005 to 2009, I happened to find some Community Preservation Committee public meeting procedures that were voted and approved on. Just as a, for public meeting.
Let me give this to Dan quick.
I'm just saying, I found it, so it is something in the record, so we need to make sure that, whether it's incorporated or not, you can give this to Jan, we need to not ignore it. I mean, it's pretty much generalizations. All CPC meetings will end by 10 PM.
We have over
We
2
got plenty,
hours left.
A long way to
plenty of
go.
time.
I know.
Pull up a chair.
I'm just saying that there may be other things, there may be other policies and procedures hidden in these, the archives.
Wait a minute, Dan, you said there wasn't anything like this that existed.
Maybe it
Not-
predated
not-
him.
Before me.
I'm just saying, this is the first thing I came across. So there may be additional policies and procedures, et cetera. And
Project submissions may be withdrawn by the submitter at any point of the review and the approval process. That's interesting, huh? I've already had that discussion.
Well, talk about surprises. I went into my Community Preservation Committee plan folder, and I found this.
What's that?
Town of Harwich.
What's that dated?
2016.
I have one of those.
No, no,
Have
that,
one of these?
Yeah, I
no,
have
that's,
one
that's
of
not the
those.
plan.
No,
That
that
was
sounds-
Bob taking the town of Concord and just
Right.
changing a couple
Oh,
of.
Changing
that's
the
what it
names.
was.
That's
Right.
what that is.
That's
He just
what it
changed the
was.
names.
Yeah,
Because I'm saying
We didn't want to
2000
have a boilerplate.
It is a
print,
boilerplate, though, by
and-
doing that.
yeah, no, that was,
Yeah, that was.
when we were discussing it, Bob went through and
That's
took
right.
the town of Concord's one.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I mean, what I would suggest that we do, you know, in the concept of the plan, is take a look at a few towns that we think are relatively compatible, you know, comparable to Harwich, and contact them and sort of, you know, get a copy of their plan.
I wouldn't think Concord is it.
Concord would not be one of the choices. Concord is larger, Concord,
To be honest, Bob did that. He provided some of that information,
Right.
It's probably in
He
those
thought
records.
Concord was comparable.
Yeah, it was.
yeah, I know Concord
Not by
very,
size of the town, but
no, I know Concord very well, because I did amateur theater in Concord for 6 years.
Much more his,
It's a very different environment. It is suburban Boston. It is extremely high-end suburban Boston. You know, and so I think it's different. I think we need to look at, you know,
we're not comparable to Metro West,
we're not,
We're-
no, I mean, I think we need to look at places, you know, like,
Seashore.
yeah, Chatham, Dennis, you know, maybe Mashpee,
Falmouth had
Falmouth.
quite an extensive toolbox of information that they have a plan,
Yeah.
they have the protocols, the policies.
Eastham.
Eastham, I was gonna
East-
say, would be a good one.
Eastham would be
You
another
can
good one to
also look
look
to
at.
Rockport and Gloucester and,
correct.
you know, Cape Ann locations too,
Yeah,
because they're
or-
just
or even,
similar in character.
you know, South Shore of Marion.
Right, right.
You know, towns of that nature, I think, are more comparable to us.
Dan, I remember Bob specifically asking certain members of the board to draw up information from the unit they represented. Mine was recreation. Recreation has has completed that. What do we do with the other two members?
Well, he asked me to do real
Would
estate,
you be open space?
open space, and I haven't done anything. Well,
Yeah.
wait, no.
I'm sorry I said that.
No, you can laugh, okay, but truthfully, number one, I was waiting for the open space plan to be finished by the town, which it is.
Sure.
And secondly, it has been on the back burner.
All right, so you were open
But I-
space, historic?
We didn't have anybody to do historic because Bob Bradley
Bradley
was
wasn't
not
here.
involved.
And
Joe
who
Powers is the
is
historic person.
conservation,
I'm Housing Committee.
housing.
Conservation would be together with open space, I think.
I think so, too, but.
Yeah, but I'm telling you right now, I'm not
Okay,
doing the whole thing.
you've
I'm
got-
not doing it.
You've got,
I'm not gonna
Yeah, I think
work on
that's
it, but I'm
kinda
not doing
stalled,
it.
but-
Jim,
But
David,
telling you right now,
before
I have
we
too much
start
to do.
talking about that detail, I think we need a more general
I agree.
discussion as to what you know, what a
Plan look
plan
like.
would look like, what are the components of it, how does it interact with the open space and recreation plan that was submitted with
And the affordable housing plan.
the housing development or the housing, whatever it is, plan that was
Production
developed
plan, yeah.
production plan, and also combine it with the thinking of the planning board with regard to trying to start thinking about how to develop a new comprehensive plan for the entire town.
wow.
So, I mean,
This is
all-
way-
All those issues blend together, and I think we have to think through what type of plan is going to be both useful and instructional for the operation of the Community Preservation Committee. And again, to me, the main issue that we have to decide on is whether we want to continue to be solely reactive, or do we want to be proactive or some hybrid. If we're going to be solely reactive, then maybe we don't need a plan at all, and maybe our plan is more in the policies that we follow with regard to being reactive. But those are the issues I think we need to discuss and come to some agreement on.
We need some construct.
Yeah,
You can't just go jump
Correct.
around. We need
Yes.
some construct.
I
on
agree,
how
yeah.
we're- before you build a house, you have a set of blueprints. We need a set of blueprints in terms of
When-
and even
how
when-
we're gonna approach this.
When we initially had these discussions, when I became chair, I looked to you specifically because of your background to help with this project. So, if I can give you an assignment, I don't know how, I'm out of my lake, I'm out of my water. If I can give you an assignment to put those constructs together for us to look at and react to, would you be willing to do that?
Sure. Oh, Kathy's volunteering.
No, no, I'm not volunteering. I am not volunteering. I'm like done. I just wanted to say that, relative to what you were just saying, the stuff that we were assigned, okay, probably 2 years ago now, was to kind of really just fit our stuff into a very specific kind of thing. Like, for example, under the open space thing, it was like, a description of Harwich saying how many, rivers we had, how many ponds, how many lakes, how many this, how many, all this kind of stuff. I mean, and we need something a little bit broader to start with.
Anything,
No, I mean, I think we need to discuss what type of plan we need and the general concepts before we get into the real details of the plan. And we need to do the same thing with the policies. And again, not to be too repetitive, but we need to decide whether we want to continue to be just reactive. Because if we're just going to be reactive, then there's no need for a plan because we're not going anyplace. We're being pulled places.
Mary?
I'm just gonna say, to Jim's point, we've had lengthy discussions at planning board about doing a comprehensive plan, which is a large project and a large undertaking, and it is not a one-year process. We will be lucky if it's a 2-year process, even if we hire outside help to assist with it. But to Jim's point, all of these things are a part of a comprehensive plan. Your housing production plan, your open space plan, all of that flows into it. And to his point, this is going to have to too, in our individual components I'm the housing committee rep, that has to flow into the housing production plan. If there's a way for it to flow into it, to be proactive, that's where you're gonna do it, so to Jim's point, that's the reason why we're not looking at anything nothing's gonna be finalized before May, before a town meeting, just on scope-wise.
Okay. In layperson's terms, what I'm looking for is a blueprint to follow.
And I guess what I'm saying, David, is that until we have had some discussions as to which way we're going, you cannot even draft that blueprint. Because using your analogy of building a house, you need to decide before you set the architect and the engineers to drawing the blueprints, whether it's going to be a 2-story, a 1-story, a 4-bedroom, a 2-car garage, or whatever. So I think we have to have those more abstract discussions before we can even develop that blueprint.
Right, because, we have this discussion in real estate and open space all the time, whether to be proactive or reactive. And the fact of the matter is we have no funding. When you have no funding or limited funding, you tend to be reactive because you don't have the funds to be proactive.
Well, it doesn't stop the
Unfortunately.
planning board.
No, I know, I understand that, but I'm just saying, if you get down to reality, this is what happens. I'm not saying that that's the way that we should be, I'm just saying that's the fact.
But
I mean, you could get
So-
a pay increase if you complete that position.
Right.
And-
Mary?
And I would say, very much like when the woman from the state was here with Ally Sabatino and was talking about how other communities have dealt with their housing funds. You know, a Providence who has made the decision to automatically designate, I forget what the percentage was, 30% of their CPC funds directly into either a housing trust or into an affordable housing bucket. I think those are kind of the conceptual things that we can think about doing to be proactive, if we want to be proactive.
Right.
And we want to be proactive for housing or open space or something else.
Well, that's
Yeah, we gotta-
also saying we're prioritizing.
Exactly, but I think the prioritizing is, you know, like when you're building a house, do I want to spend the 30 grand on a great room or a bigger kitchen? You know,
Right.
it's all those things that we have to decide. And I don't know, perhaps we start by looking at some of those similar towns and see what they do and get some ideas before we actually have that kind
Dan.
of
I have a question
brainstorm.
Sure.
for Jim. Do you know whether any municipalities have strategic plans, which is different from a
Well,
comprehensive plan?
strategic plans quite often are a component of a comprehensive plan. Because a strategic,
That's not my idea of a strategic.
okay, my idea, then maybe we're talking different languages. Because my idea of a strategic plan is more, you know, once you have the general overall concept, then how do you do the implementation?
No,
and how do you-
that's not.
Okay,
That's not the
then
strategic.
I guess we have different definitions.
Yeah.
What would your definition of the strategic plan be?
And I get this from my experience in state ed. You have a vision statement, a mission statement, core values, core philosophy, and then you have goals, objectives within those goals, performance measures, performance standards.
Kathy?
Can I just make a suggestion? So before we have this conversation, it would be, I think, better for all of us if we were a little bit better versed in this. So what about if each of us took a town and at least read their community preservation plan before we came to the next meeting? Therefore, at least we'd have some idea
Great
of
minds
what we're
think alike.
talking about. I mean, and for each of us to read a plan is in a month is not, it's not like we're having meetings every other week now.
Yeah.
It is not
I-
that hard, but I wouldn't know where to start unless I read somebody's plan.
That would be part of our construct, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
See
that
what's
would
out
be
there.
part of what I would suggest that we do that, you know, in order to get a sense of what other towns are doing
Yeah.
and give us some ideas. Now, I think the only danger in that is I don't think we want to be limited to just what other towns do, because
No,
Harwich is unique in some ways. and
Oh,
therefore,
absolutely.
right.
You know,
But
but
it's a
it
start.
could give us ideas and at least help us get going on that discussion.
So what if we all pick a plan and just email Dave, make sure we're not duplicating efforts on a town that we've picked?
Well, or the other
Or
way
sign it.
is, do we want to sort of just assign towns tonight, and then each individual
by me,
can go
yeah.
to that town and see if they even have a
Right,
comprehensive
they
plan?
don't have a plan, we're done.
I would also
Let's see, I'll take Truro, no.
Truro may
No,
be
no,
one that
I'm
has
just-
You
one.
may be surprised.
You may be
What
surprised.
you're missing, folks, is
I would
there
also
are two members that aren't here,
Yeah,
so.
I would also suggest that we not just look at the plan,
Oh, By
if
vote,
there is one, but
they just
also
get
their whole
assigned.
application process, their protocols and that kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good idea, Dan, and what we could do is, you know, each of us take a town and go to that town.
See what's
and
there.
see what's there,
Exactly.
plan, policy statements, applications, you know, however they do it, and, you know, get samples of whatever they're willing to give us.
You know, we used to say, if you see something good, steal
Are you
it.
retired? Yes.
In some ways, yes.
What?
I'm not.
Well, you're the chairman, you don't have to assign anything to yourself.
No, I'll make the assignments.
You make the assignments, David.
I'll be going there electronically, let's say that.
Yeah, and, yeah, that may,
You physically have to be there.
depending on where the thing is. I mean, you know, if we're talking about Dennis and Chatham, it's almost easier just to go into the office.
Exactly.
You know, and again, it depends on how these towns are staffed. I mean, on one issue related to one of the applications, I made a call to the town of Newton. The town of Newton has a full-time staff person just to deal with community preservation, act issues.
If
And
you
I
go
followed up, I
online,
followed up on one of the
it's
applications
outstanding.
and called the town of Eastham, and I called the library, because that's where we have our applications, and they had nothing at the
Right.
library.
So it may be all over the place, and again,
They
if
will
the
be.
towns are like us, where, we have absolutely no staff whatsoever, then it may be a little bit more difficult, because we're gonna have to meet with either the chairman or one of the members of their community preservation committee. And the logistics of doing that, in some towns may be easy, and sometimes it
Right.
may not be easy.
All right, based on that information, the chair's going to assign himself the town of Eastham.
Oh, I was gonna take that one.
Because I've got that documentation, I went through it thoroughly 2
Okay.
years ago when we first
All right,
started.
Good, that's
okay,
fine.
there.
So,
I'd be happy to take Chatham.
Okay.
I'll take Falmouth.
Ooh, big one.
I can take Dennis.
You pick a small one.
Truro.
Sandwich.
No, not Sandwich,
Provincetown.
they're too big.
Falmouth? You've
No,
got
she
Falmouth.
took Falmouth.
I took Falmouth.
Yeah, I want small.
Well, I won't say Barnstable then.
How about
No.
Wellfleet?
Oh, that's far.
You have a
What
nice
about-
car, don't worry about it, Kathy.
Hey, Kathy,
Try
Wellfleet would be
Mashpee.
good because I've been there and you'll do fine by
The
it.
Wellfleet Town Hall, you mean?
Huh?
You've been to the Wellfleet Town Hall?
No, I'm going online.
Oh, well, but yeah, but some stuff may not be, for example, if you went under the Harwich Community Preservation Committee, page, and looked for our community preservation plan, you wouldn't find anything.
It's because there's nothing
We
there
don't
yet.
I know, but a lot of them, it may not be, something that they have available online. And I think what you were saying is that we may have to go to the town hall or to the library if
Make
they
a phone
have
call.
one.
Or to a member of their
Oh,
community
right.
preservation
But they should be a
committee.
public document if they have one.
If
They
they
should
have
be,
a
yeah.
plan, it'll be on
I mean, to show you the example,
Where's Joe from? Where is Joe?
I think it's either
East-
Truro or
Eastham,
Wellfleet.
right? Oh, well.
No, it's either Wellfleet or Truro.
Alright, so
Joe
he's
is the
gonna want-
Wellfleet Town Clerk.
Oh, he'll
Wellfleet.
want that.
Okay,
then.
so
He'll want
We
Wellfleet.
could assign
Yeah.
him,
We could assign Wellfleet to
because he's
Joe.
there.
And I mean, I picked Chatham
Joe get
because I
Wellfleet.
had worked very very closely with Ally when she was here, and she's now in the planning department. So my first call's gonna be to Ally to see,
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Cheater.
yeah, that's why
You beat me to the
I
punch.
beat you to it,
Does
yeah.
anybody know where Cindy, in the vicinity of her employment is? Is she in Barnstable or?
I think she is, because I think she works for the Housing Assistance Corporation, I thought.
Where are they out of?
I think it's Barnstable.
I think this is a
Running
good,
out of towns.
I think this is a good first step. Let me suggest a second step that we can do after we see how successful this first step is. I think it might be helpful to contact the Cape Cod Commission and see if they have any thoughts, suggestions, ideas, models, or whatever that they may be willing to share with us.
Do you mean the coalition, or
No,
you mean the
the
commission?
Cape
Commission
Cod
itself,
Commission.
yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the county government.
The coalition might have some
The
material.
coalition might
The
have some stuff,
coalition
too.
might also, yes,
Yeah, I'll take a look at that.
okay.
Right.
Hold on.
And
Are you volunteering to
I don't have a
contact
town
the?
yet.
I could contact the
Commission
Cape
and-
Cod
Oh, there's
Commission.
one.
Yeah, you got the coalition?
Mashpee.
But what I'd like to do first, before I
Small.
contact the Cape Cod Commission, is do this local town stuff and have that discussion.
Okay,
So I would like,
makes sense.
let's have the local town discussion at our next meeting a month from now, and then see where we are on that. And, because I would rather go to the Cape Cod Commission with at least some vague idea of what we're talking about, so we don't get dragged down a path that we
You
may
don't wanna
not
go
want to
down.
get dragged down.
Okay, I took Mashpee.
Okay. What about Cindy?
Well,
I don't want to assign Cindy
I don't wanna
Barnstable. It's,
Too big.
Barnstable's way too big, that's not
Well, like
comparable.
Osterville or could do it, or,
Well, those are all part of
oh,
Barnstable.
they're all part of Barnstable, okay.
Sandwich?
What about Sandwich? Yeah.
Why don't we just let her pick. I'll give her the names.
Of what's left, Yarmouth,
Yarmouth is left, yeah.
Yarmouth is left,
There's not much there.
no?
Yeah, just let her pick another town.
Well, it's just
Okay,
in
all right.
terms of what they have online. They
Yeah.
might have stuff.
Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, in doing research for a completely different purpose, for a completely different organization, I had to research into Brewster, and Brewster like had nothing
Brewster.
online.
Oh, forgot about Brewster.
Brewster, they're perfect.
You
I'll
dropped the
take
ball.
Brewster.
You know, she dropped the ball, she dropped the ball.
I'm taking Brewster, they're closer. I'm taking Brewster. Switch me.
Mashpee's off the list.
Smash me's off the list.
So,
That was good.
just
So
to
you
be
can
sh-
thank me for that,
Yes.
okay?
Good, good.
just to
Good
be
job.
sure we know what we're gonna do and what the outcome is gonna be. We're gonna go to these towns. We're gonna see if they have a plan. We're gonna see if they have protocols, what their application looks like.
Oh, we're doing all that? Oh,
yes.
we're not just looking at the plan?
No.
Not just the plan,
I
but
think we're looking at their whole
Oh, okay.
operation.
the whole
Okay.
CPA.
Right,
Procedure.
Yeah,
That's the good thing about Eastham, it's all there.
yeah.
okay. And then we're gonna report back.
And then that will be a major subject for discussion, at our next meeting a month from now.
We have something else we have to address on the agenda, and that will be Dave Spitz. I want to clean that up. I want to get it done. So, he doesn't necessarily have to come in, unless the board wants to.
I would
invite him.
prefer him to come in because, he's the one that's now in charge. And so I would like to get, before we take back money, I would like him here to know exactly what we're doing,
Fair enough,
okay?
fair enough.
And I think we can do that a month. I mean, the reason I took a break is I wanted to find out what was going on because I worked very closely with David.
Okay,
But I think a month from now would probably be all right.
Okay.
all right, so he'll be on the docket for
The next
next
meeting.
agenda, yep.
Okay.
I'll invite him. The secretary, I'll invite him. Is there anything else?
Jan's time?
We
Already
don't do
signed
that
for.
anymore. Oh, we don't vote on it anymore.
Chair does.
No?
don't
We
have to
haven't
vote.
voted on it for months.
You haven't paid me in months, isn't that true? No.
We,
I knew we did, no.
Yes,
Months?
we,
Months.
months.
Yeah,
No.
the town changed how
Yeah,
they,
we, months. We
months.
boil,
Where have you been, Dan?
that's okay.
I'm
That's all
planning
right.
a Mardi Gras party.
All right, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
All those in favor?
aye.
All right, so we gotta do this corner.